Wanted to finish maybe on talking about regulation a little bit. You know, strangely enough, I just finished Gary Gensler's 2018 course at Sloan School of Management, which I spent some time at a long time ago, where he teaches blockchain. And unfortunately, I'm really starting to get to like Gary because he's a really smart guy, really understands the tech. And this is before he was appointed SEC chairman, where he called stablecoins the poker chips of the Wild West. And I understand part of his job is now as politician. But he constantly refers to the incredible work being done in cryptography at MIT. He's obviously talking about Silvio Mercalli, who you worked with. Your thoughts on regulation? I know you've been successful in putting some things through with SEC regulation, maybe because it's on Bitcoin, which of course is flying under the radar of the SEC. How do you think we move forward? How do you think we approach regulation? How do you see Gary Gensler in his role? Again, I got to give it up. The guy's incredibly smart. I also understand he's got a tough role in an underfunded institution, which is the SEC. He's got a blunt instrument that he's trying to use to keep everybody safe from bad protocols and scams. But also, unfortunately, that instrument stops innovation. Your thoughts?
I think my thoughts are pretty much like, obviously we've had some experience working with the SEC. It was a very long process, but, the entire industry was surprised and celebrated the fact that they actually qualified a token offering. And that was a sign of like, we are willing to adapt, right? We are willing to adapt to the new world. But I don't think we've seen a lot more from them since then. Like this is like back in 2019, right? Like there's so many people who are trying to get ETF approved. It's not happening. Like there were talks of like, hey, maybe there would be some sort of a ATS approval. Hasn't happened for many years. So I do think like people are starting to become frustrated. Like if you do a general temperature check in the industry, like I think people would be like, the regulators are kind of like cutting off the US market for crypto. And it results in a lot of like really funny scenarios as well, right? Like for example, you would go to a website and it would say that if you're from Iran, North Korea, or the US, like you cannot use our services, right? And that it should really like I think it begs the question that hey, what's happening that the US is ending up in that list of countries, right? So with that said, I do think that Gary Gensler is doing his job, right? Like he's saying that here are the laws and regulations, and we are basically here to enforce them. And if you would try to engage with them, I haven't had a one-on-one conversation with them or directly tried any of this, but my understanding from what I've learned in the industry is that Gary basically would point you to that why don't you go to Congress and try to get some new laws. I think that's where his mind is at, that if you want change, get new laws approved, right? He views his job as like, I am the enforcer of the existing laws, and that's what we're going to do. I personally think that it's going to be almost impossible for the regulators to keep up with this industry because it's like there's a Cambrian explosion of innovation happening, right? Like how many decentralized exchanges are you going to try and shut down? Like there's one popping up like every other day, right? Like you wouldn't be able to even like even if you give the SEC like 1,000x more resources, they still wouldn't be able to keep up with the pace of this industry. So something clearly needs to change, right? And there are some people like Hester who are putting up fairly reasonable proposals of like safe harbors and some of the work that we have done where we had an entire legal framework for decentralization, for example, that can fit in really well with these safe harbors. Well, a safe harbor basically says is that, for the first 3 years after the launch of a project, you're kind of like in the safe harbor, but at the end of the period, you need to be decentralized enough. And that's really the core of the question, that how do you become decentralized enough? But you're at least letting the entrepreneur start, right? And you have a time period within the safe harbor. And I do think it's one of the best proposals out there. And then the really key question is the legal framework for decentralization. But people like us have already done work there, right? Like we've already paid the legal fees, just like we paid the legal fees of coming up with a framework for how to do a SEC qualified token offering. But I don't think a lot of people can still afford that. I think it's still the costs are still very prohibitive, and the entire process has too much overhead. But similarly, we have actually already done the work for here's a legal framework for how do you decentralize, and here's how you can do the analysis, and here are the factors. Someone can take that, maybe improve on it, and use that in a safe harbor like approach. And I think that could be a very practical, good outcome for the US markets.